Hey there boys, today we're going to be talking about the changes to rocket launchers they made this season, including the buffs to high impact frames and several exotics. Rockets are some of the best weapons in the game, and having any buffs for them is absolutely insane. We have a lot to talk about, so let's not waste any time and get into it. So first and foremost, I want to talk about what they've done with rocket launchers. They've done a little bit to start evening out the frames, and I actually kind of like these changes too. For precision frames, they remove 5% of the 10% damage loss that you get with them. However, that still makes them 15% less damage per shot than the adaptive and aggressive frames. However, they increase the ammo it gets by 2 shots, and the same can be said for high impact frames, which are still 5% more damage than precision frames. And I actually kind of like this change for the high impact frames. However, I do think precision frames are still going to need more love because the tracking literally means nothing on them. That being said, with high impact frames, I do really like the change because it's basically making them into the total damage rockets now. They could have just given it the same 10% damage buff that adaptives and aggressives had just to put them on the same playing field, so I actually really like that they've gone and did this to make them a little bit different. Now they have higher ammo reserves, and they also did a shift to the damage profile to make them deal more damage from their explosion than their impact. And these two changes in specific to high impact seems like they had a very specific vision for where they wanted high impact frame rockets to go, and that is the GM and general play meta. And that is almost exactly what they've done. For the most part, you're still the best off using an adaptive or an aggressive for DPS, just because we don't really need the extra total damage at all. The total damage of a bunch of people just using adaptive frame rockets is already higher than every boss in the game, so increasing your total damage even more with a high impact frame doesn't really help. But remember that high impact frames do still do their damage quite a bit slower than adaptive frames by having 10% less damage per shot. This is compounded even farther by having a complete lack of good rolled options for high impact frames. While we do have some decent choices for GMs, like the Field Prep and Bipod roll on Semiotician, or the Bipod Envious roll on the Braytech Osprey, these still really aren't all that amazing, and obviously there's just nothing quite like the perks on Apex on any other rocket right now. I honestly really hope that we get a Void high impact frame rocket that has bait and switch soon. In general, I just want to get some new rocket launchers. I know that a lot of people kind of shrug that off and are like, oh, but rockets are already so good, we don't need even more. But think about it for a second. How many relevant rockets are there? And how many rockets even are there just that are available? I mean, currently as far as relevant rockets go, it's mostly Apex, maybe Cold Comfort sometimes, and even more sometimes, maybe Pro Extermination for like the surrounded stuff, but really we just don't have any other rockets that have good perks. Most of them don't even have modern perks, they're just like old relics of the past with like cluster bombs and stuff as their best damage perk. And as for the rest, there's only 30 non-sunset rocket launchers, and like 4 or 5 of those are just adept copies or like reissued versions of old ones. And the adept copies genuinely do have the exact same perks, and especially now after the changes to boss spec, there's literally no benefit to adept weapons in PvE at all. Which is actually another quick change we can talk about. If you didn't know, Bungie basically just made Major Spec completely useless now. They updated champions and mini-bosses to be classified as boss spec now, so literally everything that you would ever shoot with a rocket launcher is now boss spec. So there's no reason to ever run Major Spec on pretty much any weapon ever, because orange bars can pretty easily just be taken out with anything. But getting back on topic, let's have a look at where I would start using the new buffed weapons. The Semiotician actually really surprised me. If you have enhanced field prep on it, you get an extra 2 rockets, and you also get the extra 2 from the buff, so now you have a max of 16 rockets without having any reserve mods, and you get 17 by adding an extra reserve, which is the true max of the weapon. Now, 16 rockets is an absolutely insane rocket pool to have when doing GMs, and I actually just ran a GM with it just to see how it felt, and it was actually really nice. I'm not a huge fan of Bipods specifically, just because I feel like it most of the time just makes me shoot 2 rockets to kill anything anyways. However, it is obviously really great at doing the ag clear part of rockets when you're doing Xeno spam, so it still definitely brought benefit, and I could see why people might like it. For me, the reason I'm not a huge fan is basically just that the damage per ammo brick isn't as good. With something like Apex, I'd still get 2 ammo per brick from Xeno bricks, and the amount of damage that does is much more than 3 bipod rockets for a high impact frame. However, obviously with more divisible rockets, you can sometimes use them more efficiently, especially in something like Ag Clear where obviously an Apex rocket is complete overkill. I think if we were to get a good non-bipod high impact frame, I would definitely use it over Apex for GMs though. But as it sits right now, oddly, pretty much every high impact frame we have mostly is best used with Bipod. Which actually seems pretty counterintuitive to me because high impact frames are supposed to be the big blast radius ones, but Bipod kind of undoes that. So I definitely hope to see more high impact frame rockets in the future, and maybe something that can compete with Apex as an adaptive or an aggressive as well. And when it comes to precisions, you can just forget about it. They still do less damage, have pretty much no redeeming quality, and also just don't have any good perks. Like, I don't know why they would make the worst frame in the game also just have the worst perks in the game, because honestly if they did make like a bait and switch one, it might even be competitive for total damage, but it's just not, because there just isn't one. So hopefully we get some better rockets in the future. I'd definitely love to see some competition for Apex, and while I do think these changes are good, I don't think they're enough. We definitely need to see some more. I'm honestly still thinking that the adaptives and aggressives should just lose their 10% damage increase. It's kind of crazy because rockets are already so strong at melting bosses, and the fact that these just have more damage also is just even more broken, and it honestly just makes sense to me in general to just give them a little 10% nerf. But again, also we just need new high impact frames with good perks, and we would have more variety immediately. But I think that's enough with the legendary rockets. Let's go ahead and talk about the exotic rockets, because pretty much every single one of them got affected by this +2 ammo buff. Starting things off, there's Deathbringer. It's pretty much always just been the on-paper king, but in reality doesn't fucking work thing, and that's not gonna change, but it got more ammo. The big deal is obviously Gallowhorn, because Gallowhorn is used in any rocket setup. Obviously for GMs you have to have a Gallowhorn, for DPS you have to have a Gallowhorn, and having more ammo for it is just absolutely absurd. Gallowhorn was already really good. Even in solo content you could use Gallowhorn to take out majors really easily, so Gallowhorn getting a buff is just kind of wild. So yeah, +2 ammo for Galley, very good. I actually learned that with the Lucky Drop bricks, if you have a scavenger mod, you'll start getting 5 most of the time instead of the 4 you were getting before. So yeah, definitely just an insane buff for Gallowhorn. Don't know why they did it, but sure. Another interesting one is Dragon's Breath got the +2. So Dragon's Breath is officially now the highest total damage rocket in the game, and actually a contender for one of the highest total damage setups in the game, period. It's clocking in at over 4 million total damage, which is just a million shy of the full reserves of a 4 times the charm bait and switch Cataclysmic, which again is something that takes absolutely forever to dump, and is also more far behind the 9 million from Retrofit Escapade, which again is only total damage and does take several minutes to unload all that, so it is very slow to do it. It's definitely not good, but again, total damage, it's just up there, which is pretty funny. The issue I have with Dragon's Breath is pretty much just that it's really slow to deal its damage. In solo content this is fine because you're not planning the one phase anyway, but whenever you're in a full team you really shouldn't be using Dragon's Breath because you're just not going to get through all your ammo in time. And now that they've added 2 more shots, this is just even more true. However, obviously your damage isn't going to change with Dragon's Breath because of this, it's just going to allow you to do it for longer. And also they gave Truth the +2 rockets. So yeah, that's going to do it for the video. If you did make it to the end, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.